women have completely taken over psychology in the US. And to be more specific, I believe 70% of all therapists in the US are women. And I think that's something that's terrible. It's really bad. Not that women don't have the ability to be psychologists, to be therapists, more specifically. It's more so that I don't think women should be therapists to men. And on the flip side, I don't think men should be therapists to women either. Because we inherently have very different worldviews and perspectives, and we cannot help but project that worldview and perspective onto the other sex. And that's why a lot of times men and women misunderstand each other. So let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I believe that there are two driving instincts within human beings, which is the self-overcoming instinct and the self-preservative instinct. This is something that I learned from German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Although he's not so reductive to just reduce humans down to just two different modes of being or two different wills, I believe in there being a self-preservative instinct and a self-overcoming instinct. And again, Nietzsche talks about this in a different context of how human beings, like if they are truly being authentic, they'd be willing to sacrifice themselves for a greater ideal, for a greater idea. That's the idea of doing whatever you can to bring about the Übermensch, right? I'm not going to talk about that too much in this video. In contrast to that, there's also what he calls the last men. He talks about this in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, where they just want to be comfortable. They just want that self-preservation. And Nietzsche also actually talks about how women, the slave instinct is much stronger in women, basically being the secondary sex for most of humanity or most of history. And that's actually not inherently a bad thing. Nietzsche actually has very positive views on women, especially in the terms of playing power games. And slave morality actually won out in the West through Christianity and his worldview. All right. So when I'm talking about the self-preservative instinct in this video, I'm not saying that with contempt. I just want to make that clear. And the reason I want to make that clear is because I think that that is the main driving force behind women. The self-preservative instinct, or as I like to call it, wellness, where women just want to be comfortable. That's what femininity is in general. Again, I'm speaking in generalizations. If somebody's like, well, not all women are that way, it's like, yeah, okay, I understand. But I'm talking about as a whole, okay? In order to be able to talk about the world, I need to be able to make generalizations. So that's what I'm doing here. And so women are naturally more about self-preservation. I think from a evolutionary biology or evolutionary psychology standpoint, that probably makes a lot of sense because, men can have power over them, or if they are pitted against just one random average guy, they'll probably get overpowered, right? So they need to be much more aware of their surroundings, much more alert, and they primarily want to feel safe, right? I've dated a lot of women and I've had a lot of female friends and interacted with a lot of women in general. And that's something that I always kind of see as quite ubiquitous, is that women wanting to feel safe, all right? Again, it's not a bad thing. Now, on the other hand, men don't want to really feel safe as much as people think. I think what men really want is an ideal to strive for and something to sacrifice themselves for. And I call that, I categorize that personally as greatness. So men are mostly driven by greatness. Women are mostly driven by wellness. Wellness is a self-preservative instinct. Greatness is the self-overcoming instinct. To put it more simply, women live a bit more in the present, because if you are just trying to preserve yourself, if you're trying to be safe, you're more concerned with the present. Men are more driven by the future. As Ralph Waldo Emerson famously said, greatness looks toward the future. And that's the reason that men are the ones who go off and basically sacrifice themselves in war for an idea, sacrifice themselves in war for a world that they're never going to see, and they happily do it throughout history. It seems nonsensical to somebody who has that self-preservative instinct, right? More sort of that feminine instinct. They want something to sacrifice themselves for. This is why men are inherently a bit more violent, because they are willing to put themselves in danger. They feel good when they put themselves in danger. That's more the self-overcoming instinct. And I think humanity, successful societies kind of have a mix of both those things, because if you have too much self-overcoming and not enough self-preservation, you are going to kill yourself with your own greatness. That's what happened to the Spartans. The Spartans basically just never lost a battle, but everything was about striving for greatness. And they didn't really, and eventually they just killed themselves with their own greatness. There's multiple theories as to how that happened. I mean, one could say that they started to actually become a bit too feminine, focusing on material things too much, and then their society died. I have other theories on that. I'm not going to cover that too much in this video. All that to say, if there is a fundamental instinct, a fundamental masculine instinct, and a fundamental feminine instinct that are very different from each other, almost diametrically opposed, but still both equally important in order for families and societies to function, then if the field of psychology is overwhelmingly women, what's going to happen is they're going to skew more toward that self-preservative instinct. All right, so they are going to tell their clients, people that they help in therapy, how to be better based off of that instinct, because that is going to be a higher demand. I'd also say that, from my understanding, there's a lot more women who go into therapy than men. Me, as being a personal trainer for 10 years, any sort of space where people ask for help, women tend to be much more humble about it and actually be willing to ask for help. A lot of men are usually just I could do this on my own. I don't need some personal trainer. I don't need some therapist to help me figure stuff out, which I think is bogus. But I do think their skepticism is warranted, because if they go to therapy, what they're going to be told is that, oh, these feelings that you have of aggression, they are bad. Aggression is bad. And that's coming from a feminine instinct, right? Because if the driving instinct for you is self-preservation, is being secure, being safe, then yeah, aggression has no room for that. And that's good advice for most women, But for men, that's terrible advice, because we have this aggression within us. We have this testosterone-fueled rage, or whatever you want to call it, within us that needs to be transmuted somewhere. You cannot just repress it. You cannot just be like, oh, that's bad. But if your worldview is inherently, oh, let's just keep the world safe, let's just live in the present moment, let's not try to strive for greatness, especially at the expense of others, aggression is bad, violence is bad, then you are just going to look at that and be like, there must be something wrong with this man. Let's change him. Let's make him more safe. You can't do that. That would be equivalent to trying to make your cat or a lion a vegetarian or vegan. It's okay, maybe you could technically do it, but that's going to definitely come at the expense of their physical health. That's not good for them. Instead, what you need to do is you need to acknowledge that violence, that proclivity for aggression, and find a way to actually integrate that without being destructive toward other people. And women therapists, they cannot even comprehend that. They just don't understand it. I've talked to other women therapists and even some psychologists, and they just don't get it. They just completely don't understand. It's I'm speaking another language to them. However, when I talk to men, not necessarily male therapists or psychologists, but just men in general, when I explain that to them, they get it. They're like, yes, especially if they're younger, they're like, yes, I totally understand that I have this aggressive side of me, and I don't like it when people say that that's something that I should feel bad about. Aggression, self-overcoming that warlike instinct is good. It's the thing that actually helps to protect the feminine, because there are evils out there in this world that want to destroy societies, that want to destroy things that are good. You need something to protect that. And regardless of whether it's good or bad or not, it's something that's inevitable. You look at all of human history, it's just been so much strife, aggression, war across all different societies that have never interacted with another. It doesn't matter. It's because it's inherently part of the human condition. You look at our chimp cousins. They are brutal toward each other. It's because they are inherently warlike, and we are inherently warlike too, especially us men, and we should not lie to ourselves that that's who we are. However, we do need to, it's important for us to understand how destructive that can be. I think that aggression can be, and inherently sort of is, a creative force. It could be a creative force for good if transmuted toward the right things. This is why so many great works of art, so many great works of poetry, so many just amazing things throughout history have mostly been constructed by men, because they use that aggressive creative force and they transmute it towards something that's beautiful. The difference now is, compared to most of history, is that men were more honest with themselves, or humans in general were more honest with themselves about what women are naturally like, what men are naturally like. And especially that men are naturally more aggressive and warlike, and they didn't actually admonish that. At least most societies didn't. And instead, they acknowledged that and then helped to use that to create something great. Now, unfortunately, way back then, people would use that aggression to take over other people, to commit genocide, to do terrible things. I totally get that. But what we can do now in the modern day, us being more enlightened or informed, or whatever you want to call it, is we can take sort of our modern way of looking at things, especially from a scientific worldview, especially with our understanding of human psychology and the brain, and we can find ways to use that masculine aggression without causing chaos and destruction in this world. And I think that only male psychologists, only guys who have that masculine energy naturally, can really understand that and be able to actually help guys with that. And unfortunately, even within the field of psychology itself, a lot of men, because of the female influence, they don't even think that way. There's a lot of feminized men who end up giving advice, or therapy, I should say, to other men. And it's the type of therapy that's great for women and not as much for men. This is why, for me, if I ever meet a psychologist or a therapist who isn't familiar with Nietzsche's works, I'm automatically skeptical about them, especially if they say that they help men. Because, psychology actually is an extension of philosophy originally, and Nietzsche actually considered himself a psychologist more than anything, and I think rightfully so. And the reason that in universities, if you study psychology, you end up studying somebody like Friedrich Nietzsche is because when within the realm of psychology, everything is kind of in the context of values, right? What do you value? And therefore, because of what do you value, how should you operate within your life? What sort of questions should you ask in order for you to live a better life, in order for you to help yourself with mental health problems? And I think that's great that really well-trained psychologists at least should have some familiarity with Nietzsche. But if you have no familiarity at all, and you are helping men specifically, and you don't understand that aggressive side, or you make that value judgment saying that that's bad and try to beat it out of them or make them repress it, God forbid, you shouldn't be doing, you're making the world a worse place. You are. That's why I think when people say, oh, you should go to therapy, et cetera, I think, well, it depends. Is your therapist a woman? Are you a man and is your therapist a woman? What does your woman therapist believe about aggression? What does she believe about what Nietzsche talked about? I know that sounds like such a specific request, but Nietzsche understood masculinity better than anybody who ever lived, in my opinion. And the academic field of psychology itself acknowledges the importance of Nietzsche. So if you were ever to hire a therapist or, get therapy at all, if you're a guy, I think what you should ask somebody, there should be two questions you should ask. One, what are your views on aggression and violence? Two, what do you think about Friedrich Nietzsche? If they can't give you a good answer to both of these, run for the hills and find a new therapist. Because I really do think that's a huge problem. That therapy, psychology, the field of psychology could be fantastic and really helping men, but because it has so many women involved with it, it always steers toward the self-preservative instinct. It always steers towards safety, and it always steers away from greatness, from the self-overcoming instinct, from aggression. You need to acknowledge that this is something that men deal with on a day-to-day basis, and then help them through their problems based off of this understanding. And it's very difficult for women to be able to do that. If you're a woman, then yeah, having a woman therapist is probably good. But if you're a man, having a woman therapist, terrible idea. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section. Like always, I don't make these controversial videos on purpose, man. It's just that if you're coming from a Nietzschean worldview, it just makes sense that a lot of the stuff that's happening in the modern day is going to be antithetical to what you believe to be true based off of that perspective. And so I can't help but make videos like this. I truly believe every single word that I just said here. I'm not being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. I truly believe that women should not be helping men with their problems. I just don't, because you just don't understand it. And I'm being fair here. I also think that men really shouldn't be trying to help women with their problems either. um, Within a certain context of maybe like, okay, I'm going to match you up with the right person to help you. But just inherently, it's going to be very difficult for most women to truly understand men. The same way it's going to be very difficult for men to truly understand women. Hope this video helps. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'll see you next video. Bye.